We are counting down the top 10 matches in SummerSlam history on our way to SummerSlam in Toronto on August 11th, and we find ourselves at number 6 on the list. 1995 was not a great year for WWE. I don't think it was a great year for wrestling in America anyway, just business-wise, in general. It was a year that gave us Diesel as the world champion, Mabel as the king of the ring, and a never-ending cycle of gimmicks that included the likes of Isaac Yankem, who was Jerry Lawler's evil dentist, Jean-Pierre Lafitte, the fighting pirate who feuded with Bret Hart after stealing Bret's ring jacket, Santa Claus, an evil version of Santa Claus from the South Pole, and Mantar. Need I say more? One gem that year, and to be fair, there was more than one match-wise. I mean, Bret Hart and Hakushi had a great match at one of the In Your House shows. Shawn Michaels and Jeff Jarrett. Bret Hart and the British Bulldog at the end of the year in Your House, where Bret bladed. He bled all over the place. That was a great match. But standing tall above all the rest was a rematch of one of the greatest matches of all time, and a match that was never even supposed to take place. Shawn Michaels defending the Intercontinental title against Razor Ramon in a ladder match at SummerSlam 1995. That clocks in at number 6 in the countdown. Their WrestleMania 10 match is a classic. It was way more influential in turning a lot of, I think, little wrestling fans probably into wrestlers later in life. But I enjoyed this match more. I actually liked this ladder match, the rematch, a little bit better than I did the match at WrestleMania 10. And unlike the first one, both guys here were babyfaces coming into this match. Shawn was the champion. Razor was the challenger. In the first match, Shawn had a title, although he wasn't the champion. Razor was. But here they were both babyfaces, and it was not the originally scheduled match on this show. It had already been announced as Shawn Michaels defending the Intercontinental title against Psycho Sid. Michaels had just won the title the month before from Jeff Jarrett, and he was going to defend the championship against Sid. Sid had come back earlier that year as the bodyguard for Shawn, going into WrestleMania 11 in his match with Diesel, which Shawn lost. So the next night on TV, Shawn gave Sid the night off because he kind of blamed him in part. There was like a distraction, as I remember, in that match, and he was going to give Sid the night off. Big Sid, I'm giving you the night off. And that set Sid off. He turned on Shawn. He gave him 3 power bombs. And Shawn got carted off, and Diesel came out to make the save, even though the two of them had been, bitter enemies. So when Michaels came back, 5-6 weeks later, whatever it was, he was a babyface, and he had reconciled with Diesel. So it was going to be Shawn and Sid at SummerSlam. That was the plan. So why did they change the match? They were coming off a string of terrible pay-per-views. King of the Ring 95 is one of the worst WWE pay-per-views of all time. Not the worst, but one of the worst that they have ever produced. It got widespread negative reviews for good reason. And the In Your House show the next month really wasn't that much better. The only saving grace really was the match between Shawn Michaels and Jeff Jarrett. And Jarrett and Rhodey literally walked out of the show right after that match was over. They were supposed to shoot an angle after the match where they teased dissension because the roadie had accidentally tripped Jeff Jarrett during the match, and that led to him losing. So they were going to build to a split, and they were going to end up doing a match between them at SummerSlam. But they were very upset because they felt like the angle was being rushed way too fast. On that same In Your House show earlier in the night, that was the night that Jarrett did the whole lip sync to With My Baby Tonight, although we didn't know at the time that it was a lip sync job. That big reveal had not yet been made. And they just felt, you're rushing this way too fast. We shouldn't be splitting up just yet and having a match. And they were just very, creatively, they were just on different wavelengths. And so they walked out when the match was over. So 2 bad shows, and WWE was looking at what on paper was probably going to be number 3. They felt they just had to put something on the show to help draw interest. Diesel and Mabel in the main event, and Bret Hart against Isaac Yankem, I guess, was not going to cut it for a big show like SummerSlam. So they made the call to do the rematch of one of the most famous matches in company history. Razor Ramon did not even have a match before this on that show. He wasn't even scheduled to be on the SummerSlam card. So they positioned the change on TV as Gorilla Monsoon, who at the time was the new interim acting president, the figurehead president like Jack Tunney used to be on WWE television. He's the interim acting president of the World Wrestling Federation, and he's going to be fan-friendly. And so I guess he's being fan-friendly here by sparing us a shitty match for one that we might actually like. And instead, Sid would get his title match, but he would wrestle the winner of the ladder match for the championship on the September 11th episode of Monday Night Raw. So it gave them a title match to promote for what was being billed as the season premiere of Monday Night Raw. So that was how we got to this point, just to give some context to all this. Michael Hayes joins Vince McMahon on commentary. This was he was doing his Doc Hendricks shtick at the time. This is because Jerry Lawler had left the announce booth earlier with Isaac Yankem after their beatdown of Bret Hart, a root canal gone bad. And, as far as Hayes in this spot, he could be a little grating on the nerves, but when you go back and listen to some of these announce teams compared to some of the announcing we get today, I would gladly take a Vince McMahon, Doc Hendricks announce team on TV. So right off, before the match even starts, it looks like the title is positioned way too high in the air. You can see Razor Ramon, they pick him up on camera, he's mouthing to the referee to fucking bring it down. Vince McMahon on commentary says you'd have to be Andre the Giant and have a jetpack on your back to grab that thing. I actually don't think it was a matter of it being suspended too high. I think what they were calling to bring the belt down for is that when the referee hooked the title to the cable and they raised it up into the air, it was positioned flat. So the main plate of the title was facing down. If you watch most ladder matches, the title is positioned sideways. So it hangs down longer, which makes it easier to grab onto. I think that was the issue. Because as soon as they lowered that title, the referee went to go over to fix it. Michaels, who of course was Shawn Michaels, so he shoves the referee out of the way, basically saying, piss off, I'll do this myself since you can't do your job. And all he did was he grabbed the belt and he just repositioned it. And then he just shouted, up, bring it back up. And so we had quite the start here to this match before we even got underway. So the match finally starts. We've got a feeling out process between the two of them here. Michaels takes the Harley Race corner bump, which younger fans probably would call the Triple H bump in the corner, out over the top to the floor. Michaels, the very next spot that they do, Michaels gets back in the ring and Razor's outside on the apron. And Michaels is going to suplex Razor Ramon back inside. He goes to suplex him once, he can't get him up. He goes to suplex him a second time, he can't get him up. He realizes at this point, oh shit, because he actually shouts, oh shit, as Razor goes to suplex him. And he suplexed Shawn Michaels out of the ring to the floor. Michaels' boot on the way down catches the railing. He took the full brunt of this fall on his lower back and his tailbone. I mean, Razor, this wasn't just a suplex out of the ring. I mean, this was Razor got him high, like vertically, high in the air, and just sort of let go. So if you can picture it, he gets him up vertical, and he just starts to let go. And Michaels had a long way to fall. I mean, this was just a brutal spot. So Razor is the first one to the ladder. He's bringing it into the ring. Shawn goes for a baseball slide, which if you remember, he hit that move in their first match at WrestleMania 10. There was a spot in the match where Shawn did a baseball slide and he knocked the ladder back into Razor's ribs. So they were playing off that here, only this time Razor, he had this scouted. He moves out of the way. Shawn's on the floor, turns around, gets cold cocked with a right hand. Spit goes flying everywhere. Scott Hall, I have to say this. Scott Hall has to have one of the best looking, best sounding punches in all of wrestling. Then, now, and forever. Jerry Lawler was the master of it. I think if you ask a lot of fans, like especially older fans, like who do you think had the best punch? Who threw the best punch in wrestling? At least here in America. Jerry Lawler is going to be number one on a lot of people's list, and rightfully so. He was just so good at it. Bret Hart was another one. Bret Hart also, I think, threw a very believable punch. Steve Austin, and Scott Hall is right up there with him. And actually, you know what? You know who throws a great punch today in WWE? Roman Reigns. And I'm not talking about the silly Superman punch. Just like a thrust, like a punch. Roman Reigns actually throws a very believable looking, sounding punch, which I could appreciate this because we had so many years of John Cena. For all the great matches that he did have, and I think he gets shit on a lot, probably, unfairly, but the guy couldn't throw a punch to save his life. Maybe in real life he could deck somebody and throw a punch, but like throwing a worked punch, for as long as he was doing it for, and as like prominent a star as he was, you would think he would get better at it, but my God. So it makes me appreciate like a Roman Reigns when I see somebody throw a good punch. And I would say that the person selling it has as much to do with it as anything. But I just appreciate the ones who make it look as realistic as possible. Razor tries to climb the ladder. Shawn snuffs out that attempt. He grabs the ladder. He's going to go to position it. But in grabbing the ladder and trying to maneuver it around, he accidentally hits Razor Ramon with it. And he kind of passes it off like he didn't really mean to do it, but like, oh well. And he sets the ladder up and he starts to climb. And as he starts, Razor reaches up and he yanks down Shawn's tights to expose his bare ass. Although, thankfully, it was not on the hard camera side. So we didn't get to see it, but we could hear all the little girls in the crowd and all the women screaming and shouting, and so obviously he pulled his pants down. And that's also playing off their WrestleMania 10 match. They did the same spot. Unfortunately, there we did get to see more of Shawn Michaels than we would have liked to. Razor then knocks the ladder over. Shawn gets his knee wrenched in the ladder on the way down, which looked very nasty. And that would be the story of the match, Razor working over Shawn's knee, which is twofold. It prevents him from throwing the super kick, and it prevents him from climbing the ladder. Or at least it makes it harder for him to do so. In their first match, it was Shawn working over Razor's ribs with shots with the ladder. Here, Razor worked almost like a heel, and it was Shawn Michaels selling the body part. Or kind of. For a guy whose knee was mangled, he sure did fight through the pain and hit a bunch of high spots later off the ladder. I guess you could chalk it up to adrenaline. Unlike Vince McMahon, playing it up like he, did he or did he not mean to hit Razor with the ladder, earlier. Razor, there was no ambiguity about Razor Ramon here in this match and what he was trying to do. He was using this ladder as a weapon to torture Shawn Michaels. He was targeting the knee. Vince McMahon was trying his damnedest to make you wonder if it was on purpose or not. He's like, well, that looked intentional. I'm like, yeah, no shit, that looked intentional. You could stop pretending. It's very obvious that he meant to do it. Stop trying to convince us that he's not. Razor climbing the ladder. Shawn gives him a back suplex off the ladder. Michaels then sets the ladder up in the corner, and he catches Razor coming off the top of the ladder with a moonsault. Michaels then climbs back up the ladder to the very top rung of the ladder. He does the sign of the cross, and this is before he found Jesus. Does the sign of the cross, and before his feet even left the steel, Razor had already started rolling out of the way. There was nothing he could do. He was already in mid-flight, and he crashed and he burned. And they both get back up eventually. They climb the ladder on opposite sides. The ladder tips over, and they crotch themselves on the top rope. Both men now are out on the floor. Razor is fishing around underneath the ring. He's trying to find something. And finally, he pulls out a second ladder. And this may have been, I believe this was the first time that we had two ladders introduced into a single ladder match in WWE. Now, these days, if you have less than 5 ladders in a match, it's considered a letdown. But the simplicity is, I think, what is so great about these older matches, right? And just the way that people react to it, it was just such a simpler time, I guess. Michael starts climbing before Razor can set up the second ladder, so Razor says, the hell with this. He drops the ladder, he walks over, he grabs Shawn Michaels underneath the armpits in the position for a Razor's Edge off the ladder, and he delivers the Razor's Edge. And if this is a regular match, it's over. But it's not. And Razor just takes forever to get back to his feet. Because the Razor's Edge is a move that was always protected. I don't think I ever saw anybody get hit with that move in WWE or in WCW. Unless there was then this delay of 60 seconds, I never once, ever, saw Scott Hall hit that move and crawl over for the pin and not get the pin. So they protected that move everywhere he went. But no pinfalls in this match. So now both guys are down. Razor, again, he takes forever to get back up to his feet. He sets up the second ladder finally because the first one was tipped over by Shawn. And so he's got the ladder upright and he's climbing, and Shawn now is climbing the other ladder. He got the other ladder upright and he's climbing, and Shawn delivers from one ladder to the other. He delivers a glancing super kick. It barely grazed him, but he hit a super kick to Razor and knocks him off the ladder. But Shawn's ladder is not directly underneath the championship. So he looks up and he kind of surveys things and he leaps. He leaps off the ladder. He tries to grab the title, but he whiffs. And he crashes to the mat. And now when I watch this back, I'm almost positive that was supposed to be the finish. I think the super kick off the ladder was supposed to be the finish of this match. But the ladder was just not positioned in the right place, and he jumped and he missed. So they don't skip a beat. Razor, he gets up and he tries for a Razor's Edge. He's close to the rope, so you know he's going to get backdropped. And sure enough, he gets backdropped out to the floor. Huge backdrop bump out to the floor, and that is it. He is done. He is done. But again, the ladder is not in the right position. And I don't know why he did not bother moving the ladder. But Shawn Michaels, instead of moving it, just starts climbing. So he climbs to the ladder and he looks up and he reaches up and he grabs the title. But as he's grabbing the title, he's falling off the ladder. So he just lets the ladder go. And he, with both hands, grabs onto this title and tries to pull it down. And it doesn't come off. The title does not come down with him. He loses his grip. He falls to the mat. And the title is still just hanging in the air, swaying back and forth. And he pulled on that thing good. And it just didn't unhook. So they show a fan sitting in the audience, and he's got this look on his face, like all dumbfounded, like what the hell's going on here? What's going on is that it's the second time that they tried to end the match and Shawn botched the finish. I think that was the second botched finish, not the first. I think they botched it twice because the belt, it's just out of position. You know, blame whoever you want to. Blame Shawn, I guess. He could have moved the ladder over and he opted not to that second time. So you can imagine now, after what may have been the second botch of this finish, you can just imagine Shawn Michaels. This is Shawn Michaels in 1995. His reaction to all of this. He did not react well when things did not go his way. And here he threw a temper tantrum and he starts angrily tossing ladders around. Finally, he tries for a third time, and the third time is the charm. He retrieves the championship. He wins the match. Razor comes inside, he snatches the belt away from him, he teases that he's going to whack him with the belt, but instead he hands it to him, he shakes his hand, and the two embrace. I really don't think the botched finish takes away from anything. Shawn pitching a fit is, it's par for the course with him back then. 2 SummerSlams in a row where he did that. Actually, he did it at WrestleMania that year too. He took the Harley Race bump in the corner, out over the top rope, and he landed on top of one of the photographers that were at ringside that night, because they had a boatload of photographers all around the ring, because that was the night that Lawrence Taylor was wrestling Bam Bam Bigelow in the main event. So there was a lot of press there. So Michaels takes this bump out of the corner, out to the floor, and he lands on top of one of the photographers. And, he landed on the guy, and it's not the guy's fault necessarily, because they had the authority to be ringside and to shoot the photographs. It's not like today where they have a pit area and they don't allow photographers anymore at ringside, which I actually think takes away from it a little bit, because I don't know, there's just something about seeing the photographers all over the ringside area. You don't see that in WWE anymore. They kind of keep them herded together in this pit, which actually, when I interviewed George Napolitano many years ago, who's one of the prolific wrestling photographers, and I'm happy to call him a friend. I mean, he's a great guy, and we actually talk quite a bit, and I see him. He shoots other events and stuff. But I interviewed him on the podcast many years ago. I think it was episode 82. and talked about that. I said, well, how did you feel when they took the photographers away from ringside and they moved you guys into the pit area? And I was shocked by his answer. I thought his answer would be, well, I'm not really a fan of it, or I liked it better when I had the freedom to kind of just roam free and get my shot in whatever position I wanted to be in. He said he loved it. He said it was great because they eliminated all the work for him. Now he just has to stay in one area. He doesn't have to move around and worry about, elbowing people out of the way to get, prime positions. So it was fascinating to hear him talk about that. But Shawn lands on this guy, and instead of just ignoring it and getting back into the ring or even checking on him maybe to see if he's okay, no, what does he do? He reaches down, and he grabs this guy, and he literally drags him across the floor. So that was at WrestleMania that same year. So then this outburst at SummerSlam. Fast forward a year to SummerSlam 96, he's wrestling Vader. Shawn's coming off the top rope. The plan is that he's going to come off the top with an elbow, but Vader's going to roll out of the way. Shawn's going to land on his feet, and then he's just going to drop a standing elbow on Vader. That's the spot. Instead, Vader didn't move. So Shawn lands on his feet. He looks like an idiot. And he kicks this guy in the head. He stomped on Vader's head as hard as he possibly could. Twice. He stomped on his head, and then he yells, "Move!" He just yells at him as loud as he possibly could. That was Shawn Michaels. That was Shawn Michaels. That was mid-90s Shawn Michaels. So he would go on to successfully defend his championship against Sid on Raw 2 weeks later, since Raw was preempted for tennis the night after SummerSlam. That's why they waited 2 weeks to do the match. And it just reminds me, it takes me back to those days of preemptions for U.S. Open tennis and the Westminster Dog Show. Oh yeah, fun times. Fun times those preemptions were. Because Raw was preempted, over on TNT, WCW debuted a new show, you may have heard of it, called Monday Nitro. In fact, I would not be surprised to find out that Eric Bischoff scheduled it that way on purpose, knowing that Raw would not be on the air, and they would run unopposed. It's smart. It's the smart thing to do. So the first head-to-head battle between Raw and Nitro really didn't happen until that September 11th show, and that show was headlined by Shawn Michaels against Psycho Sid, and Eric Bischoff, in a move that he would continue doing, decided to spoil the outcome of the match on his show before it even aired on USA. Because Raw was a taped show, and Bischoff told people, don't bother channel surfing because the other show was taped 2 weeks ago. And Shawn Michaels pins the big guy with a super kick. Actually, he pinned him after 3 super kicks. But that was the sort of thing that Bischoff resorted to doing, which as a WWF fan at the time, when I would put Nitro on, pissed me off to no end. I can see why Jerry Lawler said Vince McMahon used to wish death on Eric Bischoff. Now he's bringing him back to run SmackDown. Talk about what a difference 25 years makes. I wonder if Bischoff one of the new Bischoff edicts will be whenever SmackDown goes on the air, he'll give away the NXT results. So Michaels and Sid, they did go on to have what I remember being a much better match at the Survivor Series the following year at Madison Square Garden, which was night and day in terms of crowd support. My words cannot do justice to how over Sid was when he came back in 96. He just looked the part. He looked like if you were going to build a professional wrestler, it would look like Psycho Sid. He just looked cool. He was charismatic in his own way. He didn't have to be a fancy wrestler like Shawn Michaels. He got over on his size and his charisma. Not so much when he was with Ted DiBiase in 95. But when he came back, he was over like nobody's business.